GraphDB lets you connect up different running GraphDB instances, with each providing secure access to the others across a network. This contributes to a foundation for a data fabric at your enterprise. Let's look at an example of how one of these instances can connect to another and make use of its data. Here we see GraphDB running on the default port of 7200 on a Dell Inspiron laptop. It has 3 repositories. They're called 10 artists, empdepths, and research 1. Security is turned on, so any access to this data will require authorization. Note that one of the user accounts is called user 1 and has access to all the repositories. The empdepths repository is not a data set of RDF triples being stored by GraphDB, but actually a relational database running in MySQL. We can treat it as RDF because we're using GraphDB's relational virtualization feature. We're going to connect to this Inspiron laptop from another GraphDB instance running on a different computer on the same network. Because this Inspiron doesn't have a name on the network, I'll reference it using its IP address. I'll find that on the local network with the ifconfig utility. If you're using Windows, use the ipconfig utility. Okay, so it's 192.168.0.79. Let's switch to the other computer. Instead of looking at the screen on this Inspiron, we're going to look at this Latitude, which is running on the same network. Now we're looking at the GraphDB on the Latitude screen. We can see that it has its own repositories, and it has nothing about the repositories stored with GraphDB on the Inspiron that we were looking at before. But in the lower right of this repository, I can pick Attach Remote Location and enter a URL with the IP address of the Inspiron that we're connecting to, and a port number of 7200 because we'll be talking to GraphDB on that machine. Remember how security was turned on the Inspiron and that user 1 had access to its repositories? I will authenticate from the Latitude with that account's credentials. Now we can see the repositories from the remote Inspiron on this Latitude, including the empdepths one that has its data stored in a relational database manager on the remote machine. I'll select that one to make it my current repository, just like I would with a repository that is really stored on this local machine. And I can run SPARQL queries on this Latitude against remote repositories on the Inspiron, like the virtual empdepths one. It's that simple. In addition to creating a remote link so that the Latitude could query repositories on the Inspiron, I could have easily done the reverse. I could build on that using the same steps to connect dozens of GraphDB instances with each other, using GraphDB's authentication and security features to ensure that each instance only shared the appropriate data with any remote requesting instance. This kind of easy, secured connection of different GraphDB instances across a network is just one of the GraphDB features that make it easy to federate repositories and data sources that may have been in silos before into an enterprise knowledge graph. This knowledge graph can integrate the components of a data fabric where the combined set of data sources can work together to be greater than the sum of their parts and better serve that enterprise.